Good afternoon. Welcome to Fishhawk Live and the Great Lakes Fishing Podcast. Today, our guest is pro walleye angler Ed Stachowski. Ed, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Well, I look forward to this. So.
If you have any questions for Ed, go ahead and put them in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. We'll be able to see them. But Ed, you're one of the most accomplished pro walleye anglers on tour. You've won Angler of the Year on the National Walleye Tour. You're in the top 10 all-time for winnings. The list goes on and on. What are some of the accomplishments that you're most proud of?
Longevity in the sport is a hard thing. A lot of guys come and go. So I guess I'm proud of that. I've been able to compete in every championship since I started fishing full time as a pro, fishing full season. So probably that. There's been a lot of I'll say ups and downs in the industry and even in my career. So but having the persistence to stay at it, that's a big part of the sport for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people would like to be in your shoes. At least they think so anyway. What is it like being a pro walleye angler? What is that life like?
There's a lot of ebb and flow for sure. You spend a lot of time preparing. The actual tournament part of it is such a small piece relative to everything else you do. From preparing the boat to planning the trip to pre-fishing to the off season, working on seminars, working with partner companies and all that good stuff. It is fun if you enjoy the process. It's a really rewarding way to earn a living for sure.
This fall, you finished third at the National Walleye Tour Championship on Ottertail Lake in Minnesota. Tell us a little bit about that experience. What was it like out there fishing this fall?
Yeah, it's always fun to go to a new body of water, right? I've not been to Ottertail until this past fall. Looked at it on a map, saw a little bit online, but didn't go there with a lot of preconceived notions on how we were going to catch them or what was going to be the winning technique. Kind of just went through the whole gambit when I was there and looked for anything that might be a pinch point or some really spot on the spot stuff there. But there's so much structure and so many different spots. It is kind of mind boggling in a way. But lo and behold, it was where the small bait fish were the better walleye were. So I was able to catch quite a few each day, which I felt pretty fortunate for, given some of the other anglers having a tougher bite. Only going through maybe a handful of fish where we were going through 20 to 30 a day. So
how do you do that, Ed? When you get ready for a tournament, there are a lot of folks out there that would like to be where you are. They want to go out and fish a lot of tournaments and be successful. Maybe they're fishing their local tournament. Maybe they go out and fish maybe one big one every year. How do you go ahead and get ready? How do you prepare for your tournaments? What is something that maybe the average angler could do to prepare for their tournaments better? Is there something that you could help them out with there just to kind of get ready before they even hit the water?
Yeah, I always tell this to my friends. The first thing is get your boat right. So make sure that you understand your electronics, you have your transducer placed right. Everything is buttoned down and you really know that aspect of your fishing. I think that the electronics tools are huge for all of us, and they play a huge piece of how I fish. Do your research ahead of time, so understanding maybe some seasonal movements in the lake, but don't just take what you read online for gospel, if you will. The other part of it is having mental preparedness. So much of this is won and lost in terms of like having your head on straight, making the right decisions during the day, making your right decisions during pre-fish, and don't just go in there kind of, dead set on this is the way I'm going to get them and that's the only way I'm going to get them, because 90% of the time you go there with a preconceived notion like this is how it's going to work, and then you find something different. And then the last part is you don't have to be the best at every technique, but you have to be, I guess, competent in every technique. So you don't want to, not go use slip bobbers or not jig or not pull lead core or not troll because it's not your forte. Have that as a capability that you can go and do. You don't have to be the best at it, but if you're competent in it and can do it, it opens up more opportunities for you during the tournament, because it's not always going to lay into your particular strengths every time, depending on the system you're going into. So I like varying different bodies of water, from small lakes to Great Lakes. So having that breadth of capability with the different techniques is pretty key, and I guess that'd be some of the advice I'd give to anybody that's going to do it. So,
and I would guess that kind of breadth of knowledge and knowing those different techniques, a lot of it just comes with time on the water. When you're on the water, what are some things that someone like yourself could point out to somebody who's not a beginner angler, but someone who's intermediate and looking to become kind of a top end angler? What are some things that you see as far as some holes in some people's games?
Yeah, what I see it with even friends when I get on their boats, and it's really understanding their electronics to the point where they're able to read them at speed, understand what's going on. For some of those, I'll say like macro pieces of the puzzle, understanding like big what's going on in the system at any point in time. And then understanding current, that's huge. Every body of water has some degree of current, and it's the relative differences in current that seem to make those concentrations of fish, whether it be wind driven blowing onto a shoreline, wind absent where the water's coming back and that's creating a current, regular movements in the system, those type of things. It's about those relative speed differentials where you find those better pods of fish typically, right? The best fish will take the best spots, and those best spots are where there's a relative difference in speed in the water. So that part, I think, especially on the Great Lakes, a lot of guys miss. And then in smaller systems, they miss it too. You'll catch me in any smaller system looking at pinch points right away. That's the first thing I'm going to go in and key in on, and whether it be man-made or natural or something that is obvious or something that's a little more subtle, but finding those is huge for me.
Yeah, that's something that I really kind of started to key in on in my fishing adventures. For people who are not sure, it's funny that you say pinch point. I come from a hunting background, and that's what we kind of describe those spots when we're deer hunting as pinch points. And even in duck hunting, I've seen pinch points. Kind of describe what a pinch point looks like if someone's looking at a map of a lake and thinking about going out there and attacking it this weekend. What should they look for? What is that pinch point that you're looking for? What does that look like?
Yeah, it can be something as obvious as, it's the narrowest part of reservoir, lake, or river. So it funnels down. So, depending if the current's high or low, you're looking at the outside or inside bend of that pinch point. It can be, an underwater point that extends way out into the lake, and you can see that it's an extended flat where it's going to funnel the majority of that water around that point. It can be a series of islands, right, where they are funneling, those islands are turning into a funnel, which is changing the current around those islands. So looking for, basically obstructions in the water, whether they're points, the narrowing of the body of water, an island, anything like that, that's going to divert current and kind of create that difference in speed in the current, because they use it as a conveyor belt, like, food coming down the conveyor at the grocery store to bring that food to them and work less, right? Anything that they can use to work less, they're gonna do.
So we've been talking about some smaller bodies of water, also talking about the Great Lakes. Some of the biggest walleye tournaments take place on the Great Lakes, and you've recently started using a fishhawk for your walleye fishing. We have a lot of people on here who've kind of been lifelong salmon anglers with them. But for you out of the Great Lakes, it's fairly new. Tell us a little bit about your perspective, your kind of experiences starting to use a fishhawk in your daily fishing out on the Great Lakes.
Yeah, it's really changed my perspective on what I thought I knew what was happening and what's actually happening. So a lot of guys, depending on the depth of the water, they'll say they're reading their boards more so than reading, and boards being planer boards, reading the angle of the board relative to the the speed at which you're throwing. So if it looks like it's just kind of moseying around, maybe you're going with a current, or if it's hanging down low, you're pulling against a current that isn't as obvious. And that's getting you relative to some probably things that are happening near to the surface. But as you get into some of the, I'll say, the mid-range and deeper water in the Great Lakes, that doesn't always give you a full picture. Couple times this year, both on the Bay of Green Bay and Lake Erie, when we're dropping it down, we're seeing speeds of 1 mile an hour. And this is when we're not experiencing very heavy winds and things like that. And it was it was happening because of what was happening particularly on Bay of Green Bay, what was happening in the main lake, pulling water out the top of the Bay of Green Bay and creating kind of a current that was getting, water just sucking through the top of the Bay of Green Bay into Lake Michigan. And we're seeing, 3/4 of a mile an hour current that was setting fish up on the structure where you would think they would be if it was a river system, so it's setting up quite a bit like that. Lake Erie, seeing the same thing happening around some I'll say settler structure that was along the Ohio shoreline, where we're seeing 1 mile an hour speed differences around certain pieces of structure, and that kind of just pushed the bait into areas where there was really active walleye. So those were both really kind of pivotal points with the technology for me. Also knowing that how much of a current there was. So I was having to compensate to troll with the wind in the one location where I was going 3.2 miles an hour with deep diving crankbaits. A lot of people aren't going to do that. It's go 1.8, 1.9. Oh, wow, I'm going 2 miles an hour. I was going, in excess of 3 miles an hour. Sometimes I go over 4 miles an hour with crankbaits. And that's because I'm going with the current, and I got to get that action that I want out of that bait. So it's that relative speed to what's going on there. So that really helped me quite a bit. And then seeing in some places where that temperature was actually changing, right? Later in the season, when you're starting to see some more thermoplanes, even in some what we consider shallow water if you're salmon fishing, but for walleye guys, it's pretty deep. So all those, I guess, things that I thought I was understanding, I didn't really understand as much of what was going on prior to having that feedback from the fishhawk, for sure.
When you see things like that, when there's such a big difference, and you're going 4 up top, and it's very different down below, how difficult was it for you to trust that? And kind of, I know you've been fishing one way for your whole life, and then you start seeing that data, and it looks different than what you kind of thought. How difficult is it for you to trust that and kind of set up your program with that information?
It takes a little bit of, trust in it, but you get the feedback right away from the reaction of the fish, right? Once they start snapping and, 4 boards go back, you know right away, like, yeah, this makes sense, right? So it's before what we'd be doing is just experimenting, right? So maybe I'll slow down a mile an hour, maybe I'll go up to 3 and I'll go back and forth. Now you go, okay, this is what's going on. I know, half a mile back when I was trolling and there wasn't any current, I was going this speed, so I need to pick it up to this. So it makes that adjustment so much faster than the guesswork we were doing before. So yeah, I think the feedback is really the fish. So it helps. It's another, what I'll call a decision support tool. It helps you understand what you probably should do. It's still up to us as anglers to take that data and interpret it. And then the ultimate feedback is you're getting more fish. That's what gives you the confidence in it. So that's what I'd say to everybody is, try stuff, regardless of what the technology is getting that feedback and understanding it through time and really exploring it. And then that feedback is the actual, getting more bites, landing more fish. So.
Yeah, it's great information, Ed. A lot of walleye anglers, this is a product that people have been using on their salmon boats for a long time, but it's really becoming a new thing on walleye boats. A lot of your walleye boats aren't going to have downriggers on them. Tell us about using the X2 and using it without a downrigger. You're running it off of that short trolling rod off the side. Tell us a little bit about that setup and what it was like for you.
Yeah, it's pretty simple with the X2 because you're using this little shorty rod and you can pretty much keep that downrigger ball attached. I just put in my cup holder and laid the probe down next to it with the transducer connected to that line. And when I get into the area that I wanted to look at, either I was going to fish it because I saw a lot of what I wanted to see on my Lowrance, or if I was going to troll it, I would drop it in the water and start to get that feedback. And a lot of times it helped me dial in exactly how fast I wanted to start trolling. And then I'd start to see those variations going. But it was out of the way because I could put it up in a front rod holder. So that cannonball on, braid is going pretty much straight up and down. So you're really not getting any, I'll say, interference with your electronics or interference with reeling in fish because it's kind of out of the way. You're not having to run a downrigger ball back where you might be bringing a fish up in some shallower water. So I think it worked really simple for me with just that short rod, and you could deploy it pretty fast. You put it in the rod holder, you open the bail with the clicker on and drop it down to whatever depth you wanted to check. It took, seconds versus, any other method I could even think of doing that. So.
We're chatting with Walleye Angler Ed Stachowski. If you have any questions for him, go ahead and drop them in the comments and we'll get them to Ed. You brought up Lowrance. Tell me about your boat. What are some of the highlights? How do you have it all set up? What are you running?
Yeah, I currently run, and I'll be running again, a Ranger 620 FS. And then I run 4 Lowrance live units, and they're all integrated together. And for me, that technology really changes, the efficiency that you can have on the water, right? Understanding your 2D sonar, first understand that as best you can, especially on the Great Lakes, because if you're set up right and you have your transducer set up right, you can mark fish at speed. At speed, I mean like 50 miles an hour, drive around and look for them. On certain bodies of water, that's definitely within possibility. Then understanding your structure scan, then finally the forward scan technology with the active target. When you get around certain pieces of structure and certain bodies of water, that is kind of key. So I use those, and I don't rely on one piece of that technology, but rely on all of it to kind of put the puzzle together. Lowrance has been a big part of my I guess, my success for years, and continue to use them going forward. So.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. You talked about running at speed and locating fish while going 50 miles an hour. And a lot of the top anglers that I've been in boats with are able to do that. But it seems like many of kind of the novice type of people haven't figured that out yet. What are some of the kind of keys to being able to do that? Because as I've seen, it seems to be a pretty big deal when it comes to getting on fish fast. You're not trolling over unproductive water. How do you do that, I guess, would be the question of people that want to get into doing that and getting out on the water and being able to find fish faster. What are the keys to doing that? What are they looking for? And I think probably the thing that I see the most is just a lot of interference on screens. How do you get rid of that?
Yeah, good point. First step is make sure your transducer is running clean and as deep as you possibly can get it. I prefer skimmer type transducers. Some people run through haul. Me, I get a better signal with a skimmer transducer. What a skimmer transducer is, it mounts off the transom of the boat, and I typically mount it as low as I can. Now, if you're unsure on where to mount it, one of the options you get that's out there that you can do is transducer boards. You can mount those pretty low on your boat and move your transducer around. What you want to make sure is that transducer is level when the way your boat's going to ride in the water, so that it's coming in at a good angle and it's not tilted, starboard to port either. So you want to make sure that it's pretty level when you mount it in there. The other part is that it's not running behind anything. If you have strakes or rivets or anything like that on your boat, that you're not getting that interference, and that it's not vibrating, it's not moving, it's mounted pretty solid. That's the first piece. Try to not run it next to another transducer that's going to deflect water into it if you can get away with it. I mount my 2D and my structure scan pretty far distance apart, because that structure scan is really only good at slower speeds. Some people try to tell you that they mount it low and can read at excess of 10 miles an hour. Looks like the surface of the moon to me when you do it, but I look at that as a low speed technology, where that 2D is where I'm going to do most of my high speed suspended type fish looking. And once you get it dialed in, so you move it a couple times, on the water until you can see a really good signal at speed. So move it, make sure it's solid, go drive the boat around, get a good signal. So the first couple times I did it, I probably moved it 10 times before I was happy. And the other thing I've done is when you're in a system where you're catching fish and you can see them really good on your screen, here's a good thing to do to practice, especially if there's no boats around the area that are fishing it really heavy. After you're done and you're not worried about blowing those fish out, start driving over them. Drive over them at 10 miles an hour, see what they look like. Drive over them at 15 miles an hour, see what they look like. 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. And see how much sensitivity you have to gain past the auto sensitivity to see it, understand what you're looking at. I like palette 13 so I can pick those fish up on the bottom really quick, but start playing with it till you can really start to understand this is what they look like at 20, 30, 40 miles an hour, because that signal, or I guess the amount of pixels that same fish takes when it's at 3 miles an hour versus 10 miles an hour versus 2 miles, 20 miles an hour versus 40 miles an hour, it gets really small. So paying, attention to that detail. And if you have an idea where they're at in the wire column, you can kind of zoom in on that area if you're really trying to scan the bottom or the top more as you're going at speed. So I've played with that quite a bit, just to understand what's going on with the units I have. And I think that goes for all units, is in making sure that you're understanding what that feedback that you're going to see at all those different speeds. But I'd say the biggest thing I've seen in friends' boats is just the transducer placement wrong. We'll be going and they'll slow down so they can breed at 5 miles an hour, and then they get up on plane and they lose bottom, or they're not seeing it. If you're not getting a strong signal at the highest speed your boat will go of the bottom, you're way off. So that just means that you're not going to mark fishing even at those more moderate speeds. So, so get that adjusted right, even if it means moving it a couple times, even if it means taking that transducer off and putting a board on and remounting it a few times. And, I just get that piece right and make sure that your transducer is clean and hasn't been banged around. They are fairly sensitive. There are crystals inside the transducers. So if you banged them up a couple times, you're better off to go get a new one and just place that on there. And you get in deeper water too, you can get some interference from the front to the back if you have multiple transducers that are running the same frequency. So just switch them, run an 83 on the front, a 200 on the back if you want to have multiple units on, within 20 feet of one another. I think it's 30 some feet of water where they'll start to intercept one another. So make sure you have all that kind of out of the way, and then you're going to be able to do more with those units, because it makes no sense to go buy a new unit and upgrade if you're not going to have the transducer placed right. Even some of the older units will do a great job if the transducer's in the right spot. So.
All right, Rick watches quite a bit, and Rick would like to know he's just kind of looking for some clarification here. Are you setting your transducer level for 50 miles an hour? Is that kind of the way you have that set up?
Level at 50, there's going to be a little bit of pitch change when you're going at different speeds, but my boat's riding pretty flat at that speed. What you really want is it pretty flat when the boat's kind of running flat, how you imagine it to run when it's on plane. As you're getting on plane and that's kicking forward, of course you're going to be seeing like a little bit different view because it's kicking forward, but you're going so slow, you're still getting most of that signal back. So yeah, you want it at what it looks like on plane, pretty level to that, and then left to right as well. You want that level. So.
All right, you were talking frequencies, and we got a question here from Jim Lemon. Jim would like to know which frequency is best for reading fish at speed.
I stick 100 usually, the 200 kilohertz. If I'm running in some water that's a little stained or something like that, I might flip back between 83 and 200, but typically I'm sticking in 200, and then turning the sensitivity up to the point where I start to see a lot of clutter, and then I back down a couple. I leave it on auto plus, and I just keep going up until I start to see that clutter pretty heavy, and then I back it back down. So it's okay. I'd rather see a little bit of clutter than no clutter, but I think that's more important than the actual frequency. But between the 200s and the 83s, I don't mess around with the high chirp and the medium chirp very much. Some guys do, and they prefer it. I've grown accustomed to the 200 kilohertz.
All right, here's one from Rob Barnes, and this one may be one that I'll answer. Trade-offs between running the X2 and X4D for walleye boats. Rob, you're going to see with the X2, you don't have to have a permanent mounted transducer. So like what Ed was saying earlier, he's got his mounted up in front of the boat, so it's away from everything else. And with the X2, you don't need to run a downrigger as you would with the X4D. So that's going to be your two main differences. That's why we see the X2 on so many of these guys that are out walleye fishing. They can take them off if they're going to go fish somewhere where they don't need it, and it's out of the way and not cluttering things up. So that's kind of the two different things. All right, here's one from YouTube, and this one's from Mark. And Mark would like to know, how far out do you set your side scan?
Depends on the depth I'm in, but I stick around that 80 to 100 foot range quite a bit, unless I get some areas where it's extremely shallow. I might move it in into 60 foot or less, and then if I'm out deep, of course I'm going to have to move it out further, because that 80 foot it's only going to give me a sliver of the actual bottom because of that cone that goes on it. But most of the fishing I do is like around that 80 to 100 foot range.
All right. Ed, you're from Canton, Michigan. It's a Detroit suburb. Is that location strategic, or does that just happen to be where you live? Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't know if that it's strategic. I am fortunate that I've got a lot of great fishing really close to me. it does spoil us around here quite a bit because it's not as much about fishing as it is catching. But I grew up fishing around here, moved away for a while, lived in, the Iowa, Illinois area and fished the Mississippi River for a while, and hunting fish out there was fun, totally different experience than fishing the Great Lakes. And then, came back here and, I do fish the Great Lakes quite a bit. There's a lot of small inland lakes around here. I won't go in their names because I want them invaded, but there's so much walleye fishing that you can do and learn in smaller systems. And it gets you, kind of ready for reservoirs and natural lakes and things like that. And, I can't complain about what's around here. It's the best walleye fishing in the world, some of the best smallmouth fishing in the world, some of the best muskie fish in the world. And, it's pretty phenomenal what is just kind of in, half an hour drive for me. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, half an hour drive to a lot of different places, but really within, maybe 3 or 4 hours to, you can get to Lake Michigan, you can get to Huron, you can get to Lake Erie. Tell us about, and I don't want you to give away any of your secret spots, but what are some of your favorite ports on the Great Lakes that you fish from?
Oh man. So I go up and down the Ohio shoreline quite a bit. When Canada's open, I'll go up into Canada and fish, both on the Canadian side of Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie. I love that just because there's a lot less pressure over there. So, when I get up in Saginaw Bay, I love the outer bay out by the Charities, up around Port Austin, go up to Tawas, and then I wrap all the way up to Alpena and fish that area. That's beautiful too. I do love like the Escanaba area and just like the fishing, in northern Green Bay. Those fish, they're a special kind of fish. They're pretty, they're really golden and they're a fun, structure-oriented fish. You catch a lot of them tied to the structure, which is fun. You can do a lot in a little bit of time when you find them there. I really like those by the bar, but I also like the West. Up until recently, I was winning more of my money in the Dakotas than I was out this way. Devil's Lake, in North Dakota, I've had a lot of fun, a lot of success out there. It's pretty wild. It flooded in the 90s and never went back down. And those fish are all current oriented. If when you figure it out there, it's like a night and day difference between just going there and fishing. But when you start to understand what's going on, and I mentioned Bay of Green Bay. That one, I think I've got like a love-hate with it. I love that I'm learning it and I'm getting better as I go there, hopefully. But, some of the locals definitely got my number when it comes to that system. But that the whole process of learning those bodies of water, right? What excites me. So like going to something new, something that I've never been to before, I'm looking forward to. The only Great Lake I haven't caught walleye in yet, and I haven't fished for walleye yet, is Lake Ontario. So looking forward to that and have some invites to get out there and try it. So, any place new is really exciting for me. So, you don't catch me kind of repeating too much of what I've done before, but, I will definitely explore new water and keep going. So.
All right, here's another one we've got coming from Facebook. And this is from Jim again. And Jim would like to know if you set your planer boards to release or stay connected when landing fish, and why.
I run offshore boards, and typically what I'm doing, I probably have one. I think it's set up right now, but I'll run on the front. I'm going to grab one. Have one in here. So on the front clip of these is usually where I'm running one of these orange ones on the front. And what I do is I loop the line. It basically, you twist it on your finger. There's a few YouTube videos that show it, and I connect that so that it'll pop off, and I'll run the red one on the back here if I'm running either a tattle flag or just a regular one for a crankbait. But what that allows you to do, so like let's say a lot of the places we fish now, you have Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin all allow you to run like 3 rods. on a lot of the systems. So if you have 6 rods out, say you're fishing with a buddy, and that outside one goes and it's a small fish, and you're not so worried about losing it, and you want to pop that line, you can take your rod, put a little bit of pressure on it, pull it, and that it'll pop that front. That back will stay connected, but that board isn't going to slide all the way down to the fish. It's just going to stay connected. The other part that's nice is when you get a big fish, and they do what we call tombstone them or sinking them, burying them, whatever you call it. That board goes like this and then goes down. If you have that so it can release, you won't even have to put any pressure on it, and then that board will just come back straight in line. A lot of bad stuff happens when they pull a board underwater and that front clip won't release. Now that fish is kind of coming and going as it will, and you're just fighting the planer board and not really feeling the fish. So I do set them to release quite a bit. There's some cases like super rough water and things like that where I might not, or they're all those medium-sized fish and they're all going to kind of pull them out of the way. I might not do that, but most of the time I'm using mono to troll, and I'm setting that front clip to release, but the back one to stay connected.
All right, Ed, you're from walleye. I'm sure your fishing adventures are focused on walleye, but what are some other species that you enjoy targeting and going after?
I like all kinds of fish. I do some pan fishing. I enjoy that. Smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, of course. Done some muskie off and on. This year I did a lot of sturgeon fishing, which was kind of new to me. I actually went out to the west and fished the Columbia River for trophy sturgeon, salmon, steelhead, all kinds really. So, but I do like smallmouth quite a bit. They're pretty fun to catch, and there's a lot of them in this area. Some perch when I feel like I'm in a mood for eating some fish for sure. But that's mainly what I stick to. But I'd say primarily walleye.
All right. As a beefy guy, I have to ask this question. It's one of my favorite questions. You're on the road a lot. You get traveling all over the place. What are some of your favorite restaurant stops along the tour? What are some places that if you're heading that way, you're definitely stopping there for a meal?
Oh man, I hate to say it, we rent houses a lot and eat a lot back at the place, but oh man, some places that I have to go to. I mean, I don't know. There's always the old standby when I'm in Port Clinton, and I want a good dinner is Waldo Peppers out there. That one's always a good one. I'm forgetting the place up in Bay City, Michigan that has a really good Polish food. You can imagine with my last name, I love Polish food. I'm trying to think, you're really stumping me on this one. Yeah, I'm not a really good food hound when it comes to fish. I do have a little bit of I'm kind of like compulsive when it's tournament time. I fish from sun up to sundown, so sometimes I forget to eat. And then I get back and I just force food in my face, drink some water, and go to sleep. So
yeah, you have a more defined jawline than I do, so I can see that maybe you're not as obsessed as I am when you get on the road. So we'll give you a pass on that one. What are you looking forward to in 2022?
Getting back at it. What I'm excited about is getting back to normal a little more, right? With COVID kind of hopefully going away, God willing and government willing, that we can see that go away. Seminars again, boat shows. I do enjoy seeing everybody in the winter months. So there's a few of them I tentatively have scheduled now. So I will be in Indianapolis for that one, and maybe a few others. Getting back to that part of it, because that's a big part of I think the camaraderie and getting to see everybody outside of the fishing stuff. And then I'm really looking forward to our season next year. The first one, especially, they put it in my backyard, which is nice. And they made it a river only event. So that'll kind of limit how far guys have to go. And it'll open up the doors for some guys that maybe didn't want to make huge runs and other events and can stay just in the Detroit River. And I'll throw this out there at my other competitors. If you can't, catch fish in a 30-mile long Detroit River or are afraid to do it, you probably shouldn't be doing pro walleye events if you need the lake to go fish. Just saying it if anybody's, complaining about that. But the rest of the season too, got some great stops. Chamberlain's, it was a lot of fun last year. I didn't do real well, so I'm looking for a chance to redeem myself there. Getting back to Marinette, fished that quite a few times. And then a new part of Lake Erie I haven't fished before. We're going to, our championship is way out on the east in New York. So that's exciting, so definitely looking forward to exploring that water and learning that quite a bit when I'm out there. So I'm looking forward to that whole part of the season for sure.
Well, it looks like you've struck a chord as far as with your Polish food. We got not a party till the kielbasa comes out, and we've got the borscht soup and pierogies for Jim. So
yeah, there you go.
But we really appreciate you coming on today, Ed. It was really fun to talk to you, and really for me just to get to know you. And appreciate you coming on. Is there something that you wanted to talk about today that I didn't ask you about?
No, I just I'll throw this out there for everybody. You can always contact me online. My page on Facebook is Ed Stachowski Pro Walleye Angler. It sounds pretty pretty snooty, but it's like fishing all the time. Message me anytime on there if you have questions, just in general, fishing, electronics, boats, that type of stuff. I love talking fishing, so. Get a hold of me that and if you haven't had a chance to fish in some tournaments or interested in National Walleye Tour, get a hold of me. I'll give you the full scoop on what it's like. But if you're interested in getting the next level but don't want to quite make the step into that pro part yet, there is a co-angler thing where you can sign up and fish with pros, which you'll learn some doing that. But I guess encourage everybody to enjoy the sport whatever way you can, and you just maybe we can all kind of work together and keep the sport alive and growing as we go. So.
All right, Ed, really appreciate you coming on. Appreciate everybody joining today. The audience was great. A lot of excellent questions. Again, thanks so much to everyone, and we will see you next week.